Well, welcome to the Sunday night live stream. RobertPhoenix here, talking to you live from Flyover. Hopefully tonight we'll have a quiet, kind of chill, relaxed experience. But you never know. So just in case, I brought these. Because you know what's going to happen? The light is going to go away here. And it's going to get darker and darker and darker tonight, as the weeks go on. So as we get into September and October, I'll actually be moving up the time of the live stream. Hello, Lori. Hello, Judy. So eventually I got to fix that. Okay. So the live stream is going to go, hey, JW, what's happening? The live stream will go live at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time as we get further into the fall. So just put that on your calendar. It'll probably be sometime after the autumnal equinox. And we'll be going earlier. How is everybody? How is everybody post-eclipse? Hello, Farrah Jade. How is everybody? How was the eclipse? Hello, Liz. I had a really intense eclipse, man. What can I say? I got stuff going on in my life. In Eclipseville, it was not easy, I have to say. I don't know yet, Charlotte says. I don't know. This eclipse is not easy. The first eclipse was A-okay. Loved it. The last two, intense, very intense. Personal stuff, very personal stuff. Some of it had to do with the notion of youth, because when we get into Leo is a very youthful sign. Intense self-care, Lori says. Yeah, I had to get into some of that myself. So I was dealing with a lot of stuff connected to youth. My youth, where I am in terms of my evolution, on this planet, my age. There's a lot going on. There was a whole subtext. Someday, I hope to share with you what the subtext is, was, and has been, and maybe I will. But very, very powerful energies. So tonight, I've got some charts up on my website. I always do that. So you can go to my website, RobertPhoenix.com. I got a whole slew of charts that are lined up and ready to go. So tonight, we're going to look at primarily, we're going to look at Fidel Castro's chart. Technically, his birthday isn't until tomorrow, but we're going to look at it today. And we're going to look at Fidel Castro and this idea that Justin Trudeau might be his son. So I decided to take the charts of Castro and then Margaret Trudeau and Justin Trudeau, and then kind of size them up, put them together, and see if there's any astrological truth or validity to the fact that Justin Trudeau might indeed be the son. Right there, of Fidel Castro. So we're going to look at those tonight, and we're going to look at the chart of Madame Blavatsky, and it is her birthday today, August 12th. And ironically, do you remember Miss Cleo? Miss Cleo from the Psychic Network stuff, remember her? Well, her birthday is today as well. And I thought it's kind of interesting that Madame Blavatsky and Miss Cleo are born on the same day. So we're going to look at Miss Cleo's chart. And then there's a very interesting chart. It's another kind of Castro sync of a young boy named Eduard M. Castro. And when we look at his chart, I'll tell you why it's an interesting chart and why he is interesting. So we have two Castros. We have Madame Blavatsky. We have Miss Cleo. Those are the charts we're looking at. You go to RobertPhoenix.com and then just kind of eyeball them, and that's what we're going to cover. Welcome to the 11th house live stream. And one of the things I wanted to talk about tonight is not the 11th house. I wanted to talk about the 12th house. And we'll see some of that inside of these charts that we're going to be looking at tonight. But before I dive into the 12th house, what I really kind of wanted to spend about maybe 5 or 10 minutes on is this event that happened on Friday with this young guy, 29 years old, going through his Saturn return. His name is Richard Russell, and he has been dubbed now the Sky King. And you may know what he did. He worked for Alaska Airlines, and he was a baggage handler. And he stole a plane. He stole I think a turboprop plane that Alaska would, fly from SeaTac to Alaska in. So he took off on this plane, and he had actually never flown a plane before. He played video games. That had happened, right? Oh, it's raining here. Getting a little rain. So you're going to see some precipitation in the background. So he decided to take this plane and take it for a cruise, and then he did this barrel roll. And for somebody who's never flown a plane before, to do a barrel roll like that was pretty impressive. And there was something about, he died. I mean, the plane crashed. There was this whole weird scene where these jet fighters were dispatched. And yes, by all accounts, he was a nice guy. Beth Berry says, so sad by all accounts, he was a really nice guy. Wish there had been someone who could have done a better job talking him down. Beth, he wasn't coming back. He was not coming back. I don't care who it was, right? I think they could have had Tony Robbins inside of that tower, and he was not coming back. He had a mission, and his mission was to go out. So I thought about this because it's evoked a lot of feeling for people. And it happened just right at the cusp of the eclipse. And I don't know his sign. I do know he's 29 and he was going through his Saturn return. So I was trying to make some kind of correlation between what he did and the eclipse. And it felt to me, or like to me, was that he was Icarus. And he didn't fly so close to the sun that his wings melted and then he hurtled and crashed to the earth. But he had an Icarus-like act. I think his life had become the maze of Minos. And this is what Icarus and his father put together. And Michael says, top 5 overlook beyond comprehension. We'll talk about Blavatsky in a little bit later on. We'll talk about it. I think Richard Russell, also known as Bebo Russell. Hi, Paula. I think the symbol for him is Icarus, in that he flew not too close to the sun, but he was trying to escape something, just like Icarus was trying to escape the maze of Minos. And I think that there is something about his journey and his experience, because it doesn't line up, right? It doesn't line up. Usually somebody who commits suicide or takes themselves out of the game, it's usually pretty sad. I mean, we have these ideas of Anthony Bourdain or Kate Spade, whether they did it or not, right? They're gruesome. They're horrible. Hanging from a tie or hanging from a scarf, from a doorknob. Look, I'm not going to go down that alley tonight. I don't think Anthony Bourdain offed himself, and if he did, it was clearly aided and abetted by supernatural forces. That's one, and I think Kate Spade was taken out. So, but we look at these people like, oh my God, well, they had this and they had that. La Mecca. They had things. On the surface, they look quite happy, and to some extent, even Richard Russell had some of those things, but not even close to their level of wealth and abundance and consumption, power and status. He had a really touching YouTube video that he did, and part of it was, you can find it, it's probably got millions of hits by now, shows him like humping luggage, and he didn't like it. You could tell that he didn't like it. It was not his thing. But what he loved to do is he loved to travel, and because he worked for the airlines, he did quite a bit of it, and he did a lot of it with his wife. And apparently, he was a Christian, very nice guy. He was there was an orca whale who's having a real hard time with one of her whale calves out in the Puget Sound, and he was trying to bring attention to this really struggling orca whale. I mean, he was a good dude, right? He and his wife had a bakery. They lived in Bend, Oregon, a fairly successful bakery by all accounts. And he left. They sold the bakery, and he really wanted to go back to Alaska because it's clear that he loved Alaska. That this guy had a spirit inside of him that sought out adventure. There are pictures of him on peaks and in fantastic places. 29 years, he saw a lot of the world and clearly loved it. So I think he wanted to go back to Alaska, but he made a compromise so he could be with his wife, whose family was in Washington State. And then he got the job at Alaska Airlines so they could travel and he could go back to Alaska. And this is one of the things that I think is really shaking people up, is that he doesn't fit a profile of somebody who would take his own life at all, right? He did not fit the profile. Hey, Kimberly, nice to see you. Of somebody who would take his own life. He did not fit this profile. So what drove him to do what he did? Again, by all accounts, he had a loving wife. I mean, there are all these markers. He had faith, but there was something inside Richard Russell that was not satisfied with the world. And I think it had to do with, here's what I think. I think he's a canary in the coal mine. It's funny, I brought this up on Facebook the other night, and last night somebody said, "Are you signaling your intentions?" It's like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, I'm not into killing myself, right? We might have morbid or dark thoughts. We all do, right, from time to time. But no, I'm not signaling my intention. So I feel like he's a canary in the coal mine because this is somebody who is treading on the cusp of what I would call sustainability. Like, he was able to have a life. He wasn't abjectly poor, but I also got the sense that he was not somebody who saw a great future for himself in some ways. And I don't think he saw a great future for the world either. Now, he did not externalize that. He didn't share that, but that's my sense. And so what we had here, just as we're getting ready to move into the eclipse, and this is why I think it's so powerful, because it happened on the eclipse with eclipse symbolism. He flew too close to the sun, even though he didn't really fly, 30,000 feet. But it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor. He took a plane. He had wings of wax and feathers, and the stolen plane was his. We know those were his wings of wax and feathers. And he dared himself to ascend and to go to a place that, he had never gone. There are a lot of people say, oh, he's crazy. He needed help. He put a lot of, there was this one woman on Facebook. She said, he put everyone at risk. Really? Did he put her at risk? I wasn't at risk, right? I get the sentiment, but it's also kind of a signifier of the times, right? I don't think he took a joyride. I think it was more than that. I don't think he was coming back, Charles. And again, looking at this from the symbol of the eclipse, we're talking about the sun, right? This is the sun. This is a solar eclipse. This is an Icarus moment. He didn't sound crazy at all. I think it's a canary in the coal mine moment. I think really what Richard Russell was experiencing on some level was the sickness of the collective soul. That's what I think. That's my 2 cents. That's my gut feeling around this. And people, I think, by and large, are struggling. You know, I think they're struggling. I think the level of intensity and the volume that's been cranked up in the world, you know, it's like Heather and I did a video. Oh, another cat. Yeah. Yeah, here we go. This is Rosie. She's the outdoor. She likes the outdoors. Jasper's the indoor guy. I only have two, right? Say hi, Rosie. Say hi. There we go. Now I'll throw her down, but she'll come back up. She's a Taurus. She's stubborn. I think people I think people are having a hard time. You know, Heather and I we did a great video. If you haven't seen the Eclipse video, I urge you to check it out. And one of the things that came out on this video, one of the comments was too much politics and not enough astrology. And it really, like, it kind of jangled my head a little bit, okay? And the reason why I jangled my head is because all we talked about was astrology. And then, you know, I went online and I looked at, you know, a lot of other videos. And people who do videos, astrological videos on YouTube, they're a bit different. They talk about openings, and this is a time for this, and this is a time for that, and now's your time to claim abundance, and, you know, move into the life that you've been holding on. I mean, how many times have I heard these messages? And yeah, there's some truth to that. Don't get me wrong, right? But what I'm trying to kind of put together here is that woman is so triggered by anything political that even if we talk for maybe 10 or 15, maybe 10 minutes about the South Node in Aquarius and the True Node in Leo and the shutting down of free speech and censorship and the internet, even that amount was too much, right? So I think people's appetite for politics is it's almost like we've been eating the same shit for the last 2 years. It's like people just cannot handle it anymore, right? They can't handle it anymore. Now, in concert with that, there's also another reality that's emerging. And again, I believe this is part of the Leo Aquarius axis with the True Node and the South Node. And that is the demonization of the truth movement, because that's taking place before our very eyes. I mean, it's happening across the board, whether it's QAnon or Alex Jones or, you know, so this is the new assault, right? As the internet, which has been really kind of a highly functioning tool for the dissemination of information. In my estimation, since around 1995, has become this really robust network of people sharing and exchanging information. Now, I believe it's also become kind of an echo chamber in a lot of ways. And the latest example would be Aquarian Isaac Cappy's latest videos, which are really hard to watch. They're very difficult to watch. I don't know if you've seen any of them, but you know, he's got that Mercury square to Uranus kicking in. Now look who's back. There she is. Yep. She'll do this a couple times. So the truth movement is starting to get whacked. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for it, because they want to shut the whole thing down. I mean, we are at a time where dissent is, you know, really, and I mean, look, I don't care. If you're on the left, you want to dissent, I don't give a shit. If you're on the right, you want to dissent, that's fine. We need the opportunity to be able to do that. We need the opportunity to be able to do that. And what's happening now is the vice grip. The vice grip, the mind lock, is beginning to get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And so we're going to have to find different ways about speaking about the truth. And I think a lot of what's going to have to take place is that if we're going to be invested and involved in this, then we have to take our game to another level. And we can't just be, if we're really going to be into the truth, we're going to, and we're part of a great awakening, then I think we have to take responsibility for that. How we share it, how we speak to it, who we share it with. You know, I had a really great discussion with Emily Moyer, and I talked about people who are kind of involved in this world and in this process. And there are a lot of people out there. I mean, you know, there are dozens and dozens and dozens, scores of YouTube channels and websites and podcasters. And one of the things that I shared with her is that we have a lot of responsibility. You know, and I'll put myself in that bucket. We have a lot of responsibility. And that responsibility extends to, you know, all these corners of this expression, right? It's not just what we bring to the table and connect this dot and this dot and this dot. And I will get to astrology, I promise. I just have to get this out there. But also how we share, like, with people, and how we can either, there's a great saying by William Blake. It's one of his proverbs of hell. And he says, damn braces and bless relaxes. Damn braces and bless relaxes. And it took me a while to understand that. And when I did, it made a lot of sense. Like, when you bless something, people become relaxed and they become open, versus damning. When you damn something, people brace themselves. That doesn't mean you sugarcoat things. We have to sugarcoat things, but the way that we talk to people and talk with people, I think, is really important. You know, if you're in a chat, in a kind of a firestorm, and you're thrown down on Facebook, or you have somebody has an idea that you think is stupid, you know, think twice about how you respond to that person. I think it's important, especially if you are somebody who's engaged in sort of setting a standard or an example. I think it's really, really important, because those minor little moments are critical. Those micro moments are critical, you know, because that's the front lines of truth. Who are you? You know, who are you when other people aren't looking? Who are you when you don't have a large platform, or even a platform to begin with? You know, be consistent with this. And we have to really, you know, sharpen our game up if we're going to go through this time, because it's going to be an intense time. It's just the way it is. A long time ago, I had a vision of a time where there would be a great deal of censorship. I'm not alone. A lot of people have had these visions, right? In the parable of threading the eye of a needle, right? To be able to thread the eye of a needle really jumped into my consciousness many years ago. And I feel like at some point we're going to have to embrace that level of perspective and consciousness. And to me, it represented kind of a laser-like proficiency. Because a lot of the stuff that we do is shotgun effect in many cases, right? A laser-like focus, a laser-like aim through that eye of the needle. That we ourselves have to become that laser. And these are very interesting times. Super, super, super interesting times. We've had 3 eclipses. They've all been very intense during a very heated cycle. The planet itself is on fire. California, I mean, these poor guys and women who are out there fighting these fires, it's horrendous. And now new fires are popping up. I was listening to Jeff Rentz the other night, and he's had a whole score of fires that have sprouted up in Southern Oregon. You know, this is not good. It's really not good. I mean, these are beginning to approach kind of apocalyptic style sort of events now. And it's terrible. This is the second year in a row in California. You know, my feeling about this is this stuff is, of course, it's engineered. Of course it is. You know, they've got Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 on the way, and they don't want people out in the rural areas or even the suburban areas. They want to eliminate these people. It's not about the quality of life. It's about the quality of place. This is what the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 people preach. So in order to get people moved into an area, well, you got to take their living space away. I know it sounds draconian, and I know it sounds dark, But look, we've seen this again and again and again and again, over time. Whether it's Watergate or 9/11 or Kennedy, what Benghazi, we've seen this again and again and again. The level of trust that we have now between the government and the people that theoretically have our backs, it's minimal, absolutely minimal. So when these events take place, of course, most people, I think, would have a jaundiced view. What's going on here? What's the agenda? What's happening? Well, here we are with the sun in Leo, true node in Leo. Remember, it's first decan now. We are in first decan, and when we're in first decan, it's the intensity of that first decan that we really feel. So what are we feeling? We're feeling heat, right? Heat, first decan Leo, and then the south node in Aquarius, which is its own entity unto itself. Now, these nodes are going to change, they're going to shift, they're going to go into Cancer, and then go into Capricorn. That's going to be a very interesting time, because what we've seen, right, let's just go into like the last degrees of the south node in Aquarius. What we've seen with these tech giants is, they're putting on, their chainmail gloves, and they're saying, okay, let's go. Let's take these people down, right? That's the south node. They're getting scared. They understand that their platforms and their mediums, right, are going to, they're kind of losing control, and they're losing economic control as well. I mean, even Mark Zuckerberg has lost a shitload of money, right? Facebook, I'm not crying for them, by the way. Trust me. So what's the next stage, right? So we're going from Aquarius to what? Capricorn. The south node is moving to Capricorn. Now, what does Capricorn rule? It rules governments. It rules big business, right? It rules, sort of this kind of old, fossilized, waspy, Freemasonic version of the patriarchy. To me, that's what it represents. Well, guess what we're going to get to see? We're going to get to see the dark underbelly of that. We're going to get to see the Achilles heel of that. And we're also going to get to see them freak the fuck out. Over the course of the next 2 years, when the south node moves into Capricorn, let's find out when that is. I'm gonna get you because we've been talking about this for a while. We're almost there. We're getting very, very close. This is going to be a truly pivotal time, because not only will the south node be in Capricorn, but Saturn will be in Capricorn and Pluto will be in Capricorn. It's going to be a big deal. So let's do this. I'm actually looking forward to it, by the way, for reasons which I'll share in a bit. Okay. The theme from Bonanza. Okay. All right. So we're looking at November. The 6th of November. Ooh. Isn't that the midterms? Holy shit. Isn't that the midterms? I gotta hold on. If that's true, then the nodes are shifting during the midterms. Let me just see this. 6th of November. So we're having a nodal shift on the 6th of November, which means that the south node goes into Capricorn at 29 degrees on the 6th of November. Wow. That's going to be interesting, which means also that true node will be in Cancer at 29 degrees. That's going to be fascinating. I haven't really thought about this in terms of the midterms very much. Where's Mars going to be? Hold on. Yeah, okay, so there's Mars. Mars is going to be at 24 degrees. It was at 29 degrees in 2016 when Trump got elected. Mars, Aquarius, 29 degrees. That was a big deal. That was a really freaking anaretic degree. And we've been dealing with Aquarian sort of, backlash ever since Trump got elected, whether it's Antifa or whether it's, kind of the rage of the left, which has moved even further left into socialism, into communism, the rise of the Bolsheviks. And by the way, 1917 on 11/9, when the Bolshevik Revolution was complete, of course, Uranus was in Aquarius at that time. So here we go. It's not quite the Mars return. That will actually happen on the 15th of November. But we're coming back here on that 2-year Mars cycle. And it's going to be at 24 degrees. And on that night, the nodes shift. How would I interpret this? Okay. Cancer, right? We're talking about Cancer. We're talking about analog. We're talking about nurturing. We're talking about caring. We're talking about bonding. We're talking about Trump's 11th house, which is loaded with Cancerian planets. By the way, I came up with this metaphor for this analogy for Cancer. I guess it's a simile. Cancer is like the middle child. The sign Cancer, which, by the way, I think Cancer is a very underrated sign. Very underrated. It kind of goes under the radar, right? Why? I thought, well, why is Cancer going under the radar? Because behind it is like it's like the little kid. The little kid is Gemini, which actually makes a lot of sense, right? So the little kid is Gemini, the middle kid is Cancer, and then the older kid is Leo, right? First at the table, firstborn, my first son, my first daughter. She's the queen, he's the king, right? And here comes the Cancer, the second kid, Cancer. Hey, I'm the little kid. Oh. And now there's, the third kid who's doing tricks, right? But I think Cancer is a really underrated sign. Cancerian people are soulful. They're capable of profound commitment, maybe too much, maybe a little too much. They have a hard time letting go. They have great memories, fantastic listeners. Of all the signs, I think the Cancerians are the crabs or the moon children. Remember he's called moon children? The moon children are the best listeners. They're great with money. They're a little on the, how should we say, thrifty side. And surprisingly, in terms of their emotional content and sensuality, these are people that have some, it's ruled by the moon, right? So they have magnetism. They have a quiet kind of magnetism. They can attract and they can repel, which is what the sign sort of looks like. It's that yin yang thing. I think it's an underrated sign. And the reason why is I think it's like the middle kid, the Leo Gemini sandwich. Jasper has made an appearance, by the way. I think he was getting jealous of Rosie's attention here. So you might see Jasper coming up soon. So we got this true node in Cancer. I mean, to me, everything that Trump talks about, make America great again. MAGA, Krav MAGA. They crave MAGA. That's so Cancerian, right? It's because Cancer is always looking back. It's looking back. Oh, remember when? I got Mars and Cancer. I do that shit sometimes. This weekend it was movies. I had to go back in time. I had to experience 2 movies that, well, one I'd never watched before, but I actually really liked a lot. Actually, there were 2. 2 I'd never seen before. One I've seen a number of times. And the one that I'd seen a number of times was a movie called Coolie High, which is kind of this semi-black exploitation movie from the 1970s, takes place in the mid-1960s, stars one of my favorite actors, Glenn Turman, who was married briefly to Aretha Franklin, which kind of blew my mind. He's great. And then Lawrence Hilton Jacobs, who played Freddie Boom Boom Washington in Welcome Back. Cotter's in the film. It's a great movie. It's a great coming-of-age movie. I don't care whether you're white, black, Hispanic, but it takes place in Chicago around 1965. It's a really good film. And then I discovered like 2 Walter Matthau movies that I hadn't seen. They're both from the 70s. And I came away with this idea that Walter Matthau might be one of the most underrated actors ever. And hopscotch was one of them. It's an absolute delight, especially if you're 50, 55 plus. Find hopscotch, watch it. It's a tremendous movie. Really fun to watch. Glenda Jackson, Ned Beatty, a young Sam Waterston. Great stuff. But this is what cancers do. They go back in time. And they're good for going back into time. So one of the things that we could look towards with Cancer, the Cancer True Node, is revisiting things like crafts, artisans, food, growing, gardening. These things are going to become very important. You better learn how to grow some stuff. That's all I'm saying. Learn how to grow some stuff with the True Node in Cancer. Because guess what? You might have an opportunity to use it, okay? And I feel like there's going to be a revolt against technology during this time. It won't be like people smashing their notebooks and stuff like that. I mean, I don't think it's going to be quite like that, but I do believe people are going to get tired of the. I think they're going to get there's like because everything is so connected to politics and Twitter, and then now, by the way, Gavin McInnes banned from Twitter because he's connected to those Proud Boys, who I'm not a fan of. It's like Ezra Levant's Thug Army, right? Go out there. Yeah, I mean, I think people need to stand up for themselves, but no, those guys are looking for fights. They're not, are they there to really protest for freedom of speech and all that? Maybe. I think they're there to, right? But Gavin McInnes, I really like, and he's very, very funny. I think he needs to ditch his relationship with the rebel. That's just me. That's just my 2 cents. This Cancerian stuff is going to become big. And I think it'll be a soft rebellion. Maybe it'll be a hard rebellion against the internet. I think people are going to get tired. They're going to get internet weary, Facebook weary, device weary. Because we're just fucking connected 24/7, right? And here comes 5G. 5G is not good. It is not good at all. Find this guy, the Fullerton Informant. This guy is freaking amazing. Go to his website. Go to his Joe Adriano, I think his name is. He's amazing. I would love to interview him. He knows his stuff. He talks about 5G. It's not just 5G. It's also what's happening with the cell phones. I mean, this guy, he's talking about these frequencies that will encoil water and air. So it's not just like they're, kind of penetrating, our bodies and our subtle bodies and our cells and our blood. No, they're actually doing things in the air with the air, right? They're doing things with the water. So they're completely restructuring the frickin' frequency of the planet. And when that happens, it's going to get harder and harder and harder for us to stay in touch with our third eye, our pineal glands, our hearts. This is sort of the electronic gulag, the lockdown, so that we, and I'm not a big ascension guy. I don't pretend to understand what that means. Okay, I've had ideas about it, what I thought it could mean, but I am a believer that we are destined to go back to a place that's quote unquote pre-fall. Where everything was part of this organic whole, and I mean everything. Like we had a conscious relationship with everything, although we may have been unconscious of it during that time. And then that is the golden age or the golden era of innocence, pre-Adamic innocence. And then we go through the human story, which is one that theoretically includes separation, right? Which is part of that myth. I do believe that there is a coming back and returning to the pre-Adamic state, but through the awareness and the consciousness that we have had to go through as a result of all this. And how powerful is that? To return to the garden consciously, with everything intact. Holy smokes, that's big stuff. That is light the universe up kind of stuff. That's what I think. And Here you have these dark overlords, that are flipping switches and pulling levers, and they want to lock this down. They want to lock it down from an electronic perspective, frequency perspective. So the hearts don't stay open, can't open, we get sick, our pineal glands fry, all this wonderful higher potential that we have, that we tap into the best of our abilities. And right now, this gets back to our friend, Richard Russell, the Sky King. Did he actually somehow sense that the world that we're moving towards is much darker than many of us can perceive at this moment? Although I think some of us could go there if we wanted to. True note in Cancer, get your organic on. Learn how to grow things. Come back into the mother, right? That's Cancer. It's the mother. The South Node is the father. In Capricorn, it's the father, right? And we're going to see stuff around the father that's not great. And the father, and I'm not talking about dads, I'm talking about, quote unquote, the people who have been vested or are invested in running the family of man. That's how I see them. Okay. And I think it's going to get tricky for these folks. And especially as we go into those inner decans, just like we're seeing how like the tech people are freaking out and wanting to shut things down. Just wait till we get into that 9-degree orb of Capricorn, about 12 months from now, 13 months from now, you're going to see the same kind of panic that's going to take place with governments, businesses. Here's what I think would be very interesting. And I was over on Dean Henderson's blog, who, if you haven't discovered Dean Henderson, you should. He's one of the good guys. He's really bright, super, super bright. He gets it. And they were talking about people doing nothing for a period of time. I've talked about this for years. That if we just stopped, if everybody stopped. Now, the sort of the small sort of cross section, or the small sort of the lowest number for that is 7 days, right? Do nothing for 7 days. Do nothing for 7 days. Don't go to work, don't buy anything for 7 days. What would happen if 85% of the population did nothing for 7 days? I think great things would happen. That's what I think. We could handle 7 days, right? It would be cool. Hey, 7 days, not too long. 85% of the population, 7 days, not doing anything. Game changer. They would freak the fuck out. And after 7 days, you can say, oh, yeah, well, we just might do this again. And next time we might do for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It was so much fun. You don't want to do it during the wintertime. But, sometime in late summer, September, right around there, could be an interesting thing to do. That's the way we may change. It's always the way that I thought we want to change anything on this planet. Is do nothing. Do nothing. Just have everybody just shut it down. They would freak out. Totally freak out. All right. Why don't we talk about the 12th house a little bit, and then we're going to get into some charts. So I want to use a friend of mine, young guy, who is going through a major 12th house transit right now. Saturn going through the 12th house. Some of you might be experiencing this. If you are, there's a chance that maybe Pluto is going through your 12th house as well. It's a very powerful experience, that Saturn through the 12th house. People that have Pluto go through the 12th house, well, that's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and not everybody experiences it. Not everybody will have Pluto going through their 12th house. Not everybody will have Pluto going through their 8th house. Some people are experiencing that now. Those are profound moments in time, really profound. Because it takes so long for Pluto to get from point A to point B. The 12th house Pluto transits change lives. They're not easy. They're not easy at all. I remember when Pluto was going through my 12th house in Scorpio. Man, that was intense. I had to deal with some Scorpio shit in my life. I had to deal with some underworld stuff, deep underworld stuff. And the closer it got to my ascendant, the closer the underworld got to me, right? And then finally it exploded and got into Sagittarius, and my whole life changed. It's pretty interesting, to be honest with you. But man, people are having Saturn go through their 12th house right now. Let's talk about the 12th house. It's one of the, I think, more difficult houses to understand for a number of reasons. All the other 11 houses are, pretty cut and dry in a lot of ways, although you do run into some dark areas in the 8th house, right? But most of the other 10 houses are pretty cut and dry. Maybe the 9th house is so expansive it can take on a lot of different properties. The 12th house is so deep that when planets go through there, or you have planets in that house, the relationship to those planets is very different than any of the other houses. And it almost takes a conscious effort on the individual's part to tap into and stay in touch with whatever planet is there. And I get a lot of people with Pluto in the 12th house. And I would say 9 times out of 10, Pluto 12th house people, I'm not talking about trans, I'm talking about like natally. Pluto 12th house people have had some very intense, deep, dark stuff in their life. I'd say 7 to 8 times out of 10, if it's a woman, she's been raped or molested, usually by the father or somebody close to the family. If it's a young man, it can be the same, or there could be violence. Even just having like a Scorpio 12th house, there's some of that. But with Pluto, it's this, it's like this monad for the entire existence of that person. Like they always live with it. And the thing with Pluto is we come back to it again and again and again and again. Pluto and Saturn are those 2 planets that call us back. And I know that some people say, well, once you go through the Saturn return, Saturn takes the hooks out of you. I'm not so sure about that. That's not what Saturn does. Saturn is there for a long time. You might be on the other side of it, and you could be experiencing a different manifestation of it. So instead of being oppressed by it, all of a sudden you've got, discipline, structure, whatever. Now Saturn's your ally and can really work with you. But you always come back to Saturn. You always come back to Pluto. Always. Because there's this quality about Pluto, which is intense and magnetic and profound and deep. And it is at times obsessive. So wherever Pluto is showing up in your chart, there's probably some degree of obsession that you go through. So for me, I've got Pluto in my 9th house, conjunct my midheaven, and so I'm kind of obsessed with 9th house stuff, which is higher consciousness, higher values, truth, blah 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 blah, right? Pluto, midheaven, try to make a change. Come back to it all the time. You got Pluto in your 12th house. What are you coming back to? You're coming back to intensity. This thing, it's in the Matrix, Morpheus has that conversation with Neo, and he says, the Matrix is like the splinter in your mind. You that something is wrong, but you can't put your finger on it, right? It's kind of like Pluto in the 12th house. There's something there that you have to come back to again and again and again. And it's dealing with this level of depth, power, intensity. Everything about the 12th house is there to take you out. The 12th house is the gateway to the soul. It is the house of the soul. It moves you from this plane of existence to wherever it is you're going next. Wherever your spirit is teleporting to, the 12th house is the porch to that experience. You come in through the ascendant, you take the first breath, you leave metaphorically. And for some people, like David Bowie, when I looked at Bowie's chart and I saw that he was, not long for this world, it was the 12th house. I saw what was going on in his 12th house, his 8th house, and it's like, this is what the 12th house does. If you have Pluto in the 12th house, right? So what's the lesson there? The lesson is to understand the nature of death, to transform the nature of death, and to know that there is absolutely no death. If you've got Pluto in the 12th house, that is what you have to go through. It's a profound aspect to have Pluto in the 12th. Absolutely profound. And if you're having Pluto transiting your 12th, well, you're picking up some of those same lessons. So people have some Pluto 12th house transits and they're not well. They get sick. Their bodies become feeble because they're in this kind of wharf and this waffle between kind of this world and the next, even though they don't know it. It's deeply transmutational and transformational. The 12th house and the 8th house, they're like a crystal phase. Both of them are. And for different reasons, right? In the 12th house, the 8th house, we face our fears. We face our morbid obsessions and things like that. In the 12th house is that and more. It's that and more. That's the nature of the 12th house. It's a profound house. If you've got planets in the 12th house, oftentimes you have to move away from the world in order to get in touch with them. If you have Mars in the 12th house, sometimes you just have to shut everything down and get in touch with your Mars, recharge your energy, recharge your batteries, however you do it, so that you can go back out into the world. Mars in the 12th house is tricky, by the way. It's a tricky Mars. I've talked about this before. You know, Mars in the 12th house is, you know, it's hidden enemies. When you have Mars in the house of hidden enemies, you know, it's not easy. It's like Mars transiting the 6th house is open enemies, hand-to-hand combat, open warfare, which is where Mars is transiting in Donald Trump's chart right now. Open enemies. Anyway, if you have Venus in the 12th house, well, a lot of times in Venus in the 12th house, you can have hidden affairs. I've seen a lot of people, Venus 12th, hidden, tucked away, secrets. But there's also a component to Venus in the 12th where it's about creativity and art and getting away from the world so that you can have moments of refinement wherever your Venus is and connect in with something that you have a relationship to. A deeper relationship, because Venus is about relationship, right? A deeper relationship to whatever sign it's in than maybe other aspects in your chart. 12th house is really, I think, one of the most misunderstood and harder to interpret houses. And I think most astrologers can agree upon that. So when we talk about the 12th house and we try to articulate what we're going through, it forces us to go deeper. And in a lot of ways, I think it almost reaches the end of language when we get into the 12th house. And that's why I think things like art, music, performance can become much better ways of expressing whatever it is that we have in our 12th house than often sort of the verbal component, although there can be cases where that can be important. I've seen people with Pluto in the 12th house who have worked in fields like death and dying. They work at hospice. I've seen people with Pluto in the 12th house work with like actually dead people, right? Like they're morticians. I've seen it. I've seen it in charts. I've seen people with Pluto in the 12th actually have mediumship qualities as well, being able to connect with people that are not on this plane of existence. Now, traditionally, the 12th house represents things like hospitals, insane asylum, sanitariums, prisons, recovery centers. It also represents things like, when those kids and all those people got interned, like internment camps. It's a big 12th house. It's another 12th house kind of institution. Prison camps, prison camps, 12th house, right? What else? Houses of ill repute, cat houses, whorehouses, right? 12th house. Opium dens, crack houses. So these are all areas we don't normally go. That's, at an institutional level, those are the places of the 12th house from an institutional perspective. But it's such a profound house. I call the 12th house the house of the soul. That's what it is. And if you've got a transit going through the 12th house, and I started this off with these transits up, this young guy, my friend of mine, is going through, he's got Saturn going through his 12th house. He's got Pluto there too. He's a millennial. He's got Saturn. He's got Saturn at 12 degrees, close to his ascendant. He's got Uranus and he has Neptune. So Saturn's been on his Uranus. One of the things that's been happening to him is that he's been having these kind of profound metaphysical sort of experiences where he's been connecting with God and trying to figure these things out. Saturn 12th house will do that. It'll do that. It separates you out from the world. You know, it's the end of the final like 29 to 30 years of your life when Saturn goes through that house. So for him, it's triggering Uranus and Neptune. And so he's getting in touch with these deeper currents that he has not been dealing with. They're starting to come out now. This is where Saturn, which is the great contractor, right? It's what it does. It's a great contractor. It begins to extract what's been held up in those planets. So the 12th house is profound. It's deep. When you go through a 12th house transit, whatever it is, even if it's the 12th, your sun going through the 12th house. Like when you have the sun going through the 12th house, that's a 30-day cycle. I think you should take as much of that off as you can. My 2 cents. Because whenever the sun hits your ascendant, that's kind of like another birthday in some ways. So I think you want to be prepared for that transit. And for me, it's in November. This would be a great time for me to go to sort of that space and that place. Right? And then get ready for the Sagittarian sun on my side, whatever. So the 12th house is fascinating. Absolutely I think it's the most misunderstood and at times the most difficult to articulate. You know, people will say, well, I've got this in my 12th and this in my 12th and this is going through, and they just go, it's like, yeah, it's hard to talk about, isn't it? Because you're just approaching like the tip of the iceberg, because what's underneath that is the profundity of a place that really transcends language and to some degree even thought. Doesn't mean you can't make connections, bring your higher mind into the experience and have a different kind of relationship with what you're going through. But of all the houses, the 12th house is the house that is the most difficult to articulate at times, both from an astrological perspective and also from a personal perspective. All right, let me get back into the chat, see what you're up to. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? How about Jupiter in the 12th? Jupiter in 12th is like the angel on your shoulder. If you have Jupiter in 12th, I think you have great 11th hour moments. You know, that's what I think. Jupiter in 12th is actually pretty good. That's my 2 cents. There's a sense of being watched over and blessed with Jupiter in the 12th. And you have spiritual riches. Your riches are not of this world. All right, shall we get into some of those charts? You ready? You guys ready? Play a little astrology? Thumbs up. We got a thumbs up. Go to my website, RobertPhoenix.com. I have charts there. Okay, you can go check them out. Let's see, we got Belief Detox. We got some new people. Brown Sheep, Darcy, Moon is Emotions. Astrology, Moon is a planet, yes. What else we have here? Darcy, yes, Moon is a planet, yes, that's true. She's learning. Good, good, good. Mars, 12th house, Gemini, 3 planets in Aries. Okay, here we go. Here's Steve and Chris, what's happening? Okay, so we're going to go to my website. Oh, talk about the yod, please. The yod. Yeah, we talked about the yod. Heather and I talked about the yod. The yod is really interesting. It's a very interesting aspect. So here are the mathematics around the yod. It's when there are 2 planets that are separated by 150 degrees. And there has to be no more than about a 3-degree orb, okay, between those planets. If you're 4 degrees and out, guess what? You ain't got no yod. I live in an apartment. I don't have a yod either. I have a patio with deck. So the whole idea is that when you get, they kind of look like oppositions, but they're really not. they're not, but they have a relationship with each other, but they classically they don't. Like an opposition would be, Aquarius Leo, which we've been talking about. A yod would be within a certain orb, like Pisces and Leo. My parents were yod. They were quite yod, but my mother was a Pisces and my father was a Leo, and it's just it's a weird combo, right? So when there's a relationship, what ratio degrees? Less than 4. It's less than 4. Yeah. So you have to figure out what the relationship is between these two aspects, signs and planets that have no relationship at all. Then when you have 2 yods plus a sextile, well, okay, so that's the yod. 2 yods, so it's a sextile. So you have an inconjunct and an inconjunct, and that's a yod. So I wanted to talk about the inconjunct first, because that's when you're dealing with the 2 parts of the yod, you're dealing with 150 degrees, right? Don't you guys see the bird over there? Hold on a second. I think a bird just went in my house. I got to be back. My cats are after this bird. Hold on. What's in here? What's in here? Oh, all right. Sorry, false alarm is a bird-like bug. So we have these 150-degree angles. It's one here, right? One here. And then these 2 points are in a sextile, which is considered a harmonic angle, right? So then we have the yods, the inconjuncts, they go right into a certain planet, whatever that planet is. So let me talk about the inconjuncts first, and then I'll add the yod in. Excuse me. So with an inconjunct, you've got these 2 planets that are connected, but they're not. So you have to figure out the relationship between the 2. And you can only do that by asserting your intuition. Like you have to feel into it, right? So let's say, for instance, you've got a Saturn-Mars in conjunct. Okay, probably what you want to try to do is to get to Mars, which is this potential for aggression, release, kind of martial application, and figure out how you can get in touch with that while being able to use that energy in a way that can be constructive with Saturnian activities in your life, right? Because if you don't, what will happen is that there's a very good chance that unconsciously you will self-destruct with Saturnian opportunities and Saturnian functions and aspects. So for instance, like blowing up at your father or blowing up at work, whatever those things are. So you would have to get a hold of Mars. You'd have to like figure Mars out so that Mars would not become this kind of unchained force in any kind of Saturnian affairs that you would have. You'd have to make an ally of Mars. And how you do that would be personal. You'd have to figure that out. Well, gee, maybe I should go take boxing, or maybe I should, have sex before I have a board meeting, whatever that Mars piece is. So you can feel relaxed around all these high-powered people, right? Now, the downside of that is if you could become like, I wouldn't say addicted to it, but you can't, it's like once you integrate it, I think you have to kind of refine it as you go along. But you have to feel into it, right? You have to feel how you're going to bring this other thing that has very little to do with whatever it is this aspect is. You have to figure out how you're going to bring it into your life and move towards it instinctively. I believe that an inconjunct is a lunar aspect, and it's like a new moon lunar aspect, meaning that it's not a lighted path. You have to feel into it. And I talked about this with Heather. The metaphor that I like to use is with the with the X-Men, the movie where, you know, there's Professor X in the center of everything, and to get to his like center of everything, you got to step off, right, in the basement of the X-Men world headquarters. And as you do, this little metal thing comes out, your foot hits it, you step again, there's another metal thing. That's the approach to the odd. You don't always have a clear path to it. So now you have two of these things. I'm sorry, the inconjunct. So now you have two of these things coming into one area. And there is a real challenge at times because you're trying to combat it from two different angles. If you just have one inconjunct, it's easier. If you have two, you're dealing with something kind of epic in a lot of ways. And people that have a lot of inconjuncts and have a lot of yods, I feel like at times that they can feel like life would be very difficult. Like there are always pieces that are missing or things that they have to fill in because something isn't complete. So I think people that have a large concentration of inconjuncts and series of yods, life to them is a mystery, and much more of a mystery than other people who don't have to go through that process. And it can be very painful, especially if some of the yods have to deal with, your family or intimate relationships, and why people leave you, why relationships don't work, and then right when you have a crisis point. Now the crisis point won't always happen on. Let's be here. So you have a sextile. So the biggest like yod sort of symbol for a lot of people is during the 60s, where there's that sextile between Neptune and Scorpio and Pluto in Virgo, okay? And then through that, right, on the other side of that, you've got the other side of that experience, which would probably be maybe Gemini. So what happens is that if you hit a planet that's on that sextile, or a planet hits that sextile, it can be very interesting for a number of different reasons, right? It will activate one of the inconjuncts, right? It'll activate the inconjunct that's having a transit. And so you may be compelled beyond other times in your life to figure out what's going on with these two inconjuncts. And it can be a short period of time because there are planets that don't have these really long cycles. The inner planets, a couple days, couple weeks. So when they do cross them, you'll be more inclined to get into the mystery of the inconjunct. The real piece is when you have a transit going over the tip of the yod. And in the old school, right, astrology, that would be like this really fated moment. Like your life could pivot on that moment. That there would be things that would be revealed to you during that time that could change the course of your life. That, and it would either happen in kind of this semi-autonomous fashion, or you'd be so compelled again to find out, what's going on in these 2 points with the yod. And that to some degree, that force could even split you based on whatever planet that is, right? It could really split you. But at the same time, I think you could experience profound revelation in key areas of your life and your existence. If the yod is the finger of God, and if you had one, it was like, oh boy, well, where that planet is, you better watch your ass. And over time, like the evolutionary astrologers like Stephen Forrest, I said, hey, look, it's just two inconjuncts. Let's not make this any more kind of fatalistic than it really needs to be. Deal with the inconjuncts. And I think to some extent that's true, but you don't often deal with the two inconjuncts simultaneously with a profound transit. If you have Pluto on the tip of a yod, that could be that's one of those moments where I think spiritual mastery is really called into play. Like that's not just a big moment for your life, but it's a big moment for you as a spiritual being having a human experience through time. That's my 2 cents on that. Yeah. have sex before that board meeting. Yeah, it'd be a great way to deal with Mars. All right, let's get into these charts. Thank you for bringing the yacht up. It's always good to talk. Yeah, so you go to my website, RobertPhoenix. Let's kind of blast through these a little bit because, well, I don't know. Let's just do it. Here we go. I think they're interesting. Hold on. Let me go to my post. Okay, so tomorrow is Fidel Castro's birthday. Dude is whatever. So there's a story that Fidel Castro loved baseball, and there's a story that he used to sneak into the United States dressed as a rabbi, and he would go to Yankee games as a rabbi in Yankee Stadium. Who else dressed up as a rabbi? Bono. Do you remember when Bono got into a bike crash in Central Park? He was dressed up as a rabbi. Did anybody think that was like just a little bit weird? Jasper is eating a giant grasshopper right now. He'll eat anything. That was the large flying thing. He's savoring this grasshopper. I feel sorry for the grasshopper. Anybody think that's kind of weird? What is Bono doing dressed up as I guess he doesn't want to be seen, right? I guess that's what famous people do. Dress up as rabbis. All right, let's go to Castro's chart. Again, we're going to go with this 2 a.m. time. Gemini rising. Che Guevara, Gemini too, if I'm not mistaken. That's their connection. Moon in Gemini. Che Guevara, Sun in Gemini. And let me just check out Che Guevara's birthday. Let me just see this. I need somebody to name their kid Che because of Che Guevara. I'm not sure I do that. June 14th is Mr. Che Guevara's birthday, which puts his sun at 22 degrees. Oh, wow. Mr. Che looks like he had a Gemini moon. How about that? So he's a new moon dude. Of course, he has that new moon quality to him, doesn't he? Let's see. What do we have here? Let me go back. So yeah, so Che Guevara, moon and sun in Gemini, and also his sun, 22 degrees right on Castro's ascendant. That makes a lot of sense, right? A lot of sense. So it almost feels like Che Guevara might have been the ideological force behind their mayhem. Of course, Castro was backed by the CIA. Most people who dig deep enough know that. And then they went a little bit too far. Now they wanted to get him out and blah blah blah. But he's a puppet. Fidel was always a puppet, right? Always a puppet. And yeah, some people really like Cuba. They laud Cuba about how great things were. Once Russia pulled out of Cuba, man, Cuba had a hard time, very hard time. They didn't have all those subsidies. They didn't have all those the buyers for all their sugar and tobacco and rum. Anyway, so he's Gemini rising, moon in Gemini, Che Guevara's sun right on his ascendant. And he's got that Jupiter in the 9th house in Aquarius, revolutionary, right? And dealing with countries that are not even in his hemisphere, i.e. Russia. And we know that Aquarius tends to be, communistic, socialistic. Hey, it's the 11th house. It's like it's the group. That's what Aquarius is. It's the group. It's group consciousness. I just talked about how the Bolsheviks claimed victory on 11/9/1917, and Uranus was in Aquarius. I've done this before. I'm not bad-mouthing Aquarius. It's a revolutionary energy. He's got Jupiter in Aquarius, highest planet in his chart, 9th house, dealing with foreign entities. Square Saturn and opposing the Sun, Mercury, and Neptune down in the 3rd house. Jupiter oppositions, they're not really all that difficult, right? Jupiter's like the big goal. It's like big idea. And then you got your other planets down here. It's like, trying to reel in the big idea. Jupiter's the big whale. Let's get the big whale. Let's bring it in. So, I mean, he was ideologically driven, right, with Jupiter and Aquarius in the 9th house. And trying to bring the ideals down into a local area, 3rd house. Bit misguided. Anytime you get conjunctions with Neptune, right, and the Neptune square to Saturn, there's a lot going on here. Not everything is what it seems. Let's put it that way. Not everything is what it seems. Even with the identity, right? Like going to Yankee Stadium and dressing up as a rabbi to go watch the Yankees play. Who was it? Somebody said that somebody played Castro. Who was it? There was somebody who actually was it Kermit Roosevelt? There was somebody theoretically who was an actor that actually played Castro. I forget who it was. But anyway, this chart could, with Sun, Mercury, Neptune, this is a fluid identity here, right? Because in the 3rd house, you get duality. There's more than one. And Neptune becomes very kind of confusing, right? I think Castro was a liar. I think he was like an inveterate liar. You get a Neptune-Mercury conjunction in the 3rd house, he's a liar. Square Saturn. So he's doing everything in his power to, the guy lived like a freaking king, right? I mean, he had a great house. He had all kinds of food. He had lovers. He could fly to the United States to watch the Yankees play. And the square to Saturn is like, oh, we're so poor. We'll wear the same shirt, the same cap every day, just to show you I'm a comrade, right? Not quite. Not quite. There's duplicity in this chart. A lot of duplicity. And maybe even with paternity, which we're actually here to look. He's got a lot of Cancer. Venus, Pluto, Trudeau. The people love this guy, right? It's Cancerian. It's kind of the Trump thing. Trump's got, he is the Pied Piper of Cancer in the 11th house. Love it or not. Mars and Taurus, Chiron, conjunct Mars. Very interesting. It's about resources, hard assets. 11th house. Hello, communism, right? Mars in the 11th house. Taurus, resources. I don't think his Robin Hood act played well. Just my 2 cents. Although I know people love Castro. He's beloved. Unless you live in Miami, where he's not so popular. Okay, so let's go into the big question. Is Justin Trudeau his son? What do I have here? Oh, man, I only have his chart. Okay, let me do this. I have the Justin Trudeau and the Castro chart. There's one more. I actually have Margaret Trudeau. Let's just deal with Justin Trudeau and Castro. So I have a synastry chart here. And Justin Trudeau his planets are on the outside. One of the things that's interesting is, at least I find interesting, is there's Trudeau's Saturn. We've been talking about Saturn. We talked about the 12th house for a great, some of this night. Saturn's the father. Saturn is the father in the chart. Now, I haven't done Pierre Trudeau's chart, but here's Saturn it's in Castro's 12th house. Houston, we got a mystery here. So there can be some traction with Saturn in his 12th. Like this could be the mystery father. I mean, that right alone makes me think there could be some truth to this. Justin Trudeau's son is in Castro's 7th house, which means that clearly there's a relationship with him. A relationship, bond. I wonder if this is true. I wonder if he knows. I'm sure he must. So we have a connection there. Look at the Mars-Uranus conjunction. It's almost exact. Mars is energy. He's got Mars at 29 Pisces. And he's got, and Uranus is in Trudeau's 8th house, right? So this is Castro's Uranus. It's exact, right? Pretty much exact. Uranus at 29 to 29. What are the odds of that, right? Guess what the 8th house is? It's a house of conception, birth. Now, it's not Castro's house, 8th house. No, but guess what? Trudeau's true node and his vertex are in the 8th house. They're in Castro's. So we have these 8th house things going on, right? The 8th house is a house of conception, sex. That's what the 8th house is. And Uranus-Mars conjunction can be very quick, right? Quick, unusual relationship to male energy. We've got the Venus Trudeau conjunction in the 8th from Trudeau to Castro. It's very interesting. And then Trudeau's Jupiter in Sagittarius, right on Castro's descendant. The second sun. Second sun. That's what Jupiter is. It's the second sun. So was Trudeau literally Castro's second son? Question mark. Castro's own Saturn is in Trudeau's 3rd house, close to the IC. And that would represent some form of fraternal relationship. But I think that the big players here in this chart tend to be Saturn in the 12th, the mystery of the father, the Mars-Uranus conjunction in Trudeau's 8th, and the true node vertex in Castro's 8th, both houses of conception. Now, what's interesting is that Trudeau has Black Moon Lilith and Uranus in Castro's 5th house, which is children. So the unusual key could be the unusual child and the shadowy mother, right? And the shadowy mother being, Margaret Trudeau, the hidden mother. I think there's something here. I do have, I didn't put it up here, but I do have chart between Castro and Margaret Trudeau. Let me just pull this up really quickly. There was one aspect here that really jumped out at me. And what was it? Her vertex right on his Venus. And if you ever meet anybody and their vertex is on your Venus, good luck not being attracted to that person. It's almost like having a Mars-Venus conjunction. It's like a wham. It's like a total wham, right? So her vertex is conjunct his Venus, and her Uranus was in his 1st house. Instant, right? Total instant connection. And then her true node conjunct his Mars. Okay. And we have, what else? Oh, and her moon and her Jupiter. Interesting. Both her and Justin Trudeau have Jupiters in Sagittarius, right on his descendant. Right smack on his descendant. Very interesting. These two were lovers. I can tell you that right now. Her Mars was on his vertex. Her vertex was on his Venus. Super attraction. They were lovers. I would not be surprised if he is their progeny. All right. Let's see. I got a few more charts here I wanted to talk about. So I pulled up Helena Blavatsky's chart. Helena Blavatsky. Another person with Jupiter in Aquarius, like her friend Fidel Castro. However, she also has Jupiter conjunct Uranus in Aquarius. Somebody was in the chat room saying that she was often overlooked. Like, I think Blavatsky gets a bad rap in a lot of ways. I think she was pretty freaking brilliant. And I'm not ascribing to any level of, Luciferianism. But number one, she was a woman mystic, and people like her really didn't do stuff like that, right? She was born in 1831, so she's probably cranking out the bulk of her material in the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? So this is an unusual person to a large degree. And I believe, and I actually think her description of root races is fascinating. Now, some people think it's racist. I don't think it's racist, by the way. I think it explains why we all look so different. You know, we came from other dimensions. We came from other, other star systems, other groups, right? That's how it works. At least for me, it does. We can see that she's involved deeply in the Aquarian mystery. The New Age is born in her 8th house. The New Age is conceived in her 8th house. And we can see that she is this kind of luminary for what will become the New Age. The New Age that we experienced, like, from 1967, 68, the Age of Aquarius, 5th dimension, all this stuff, that was just the latest iteration. Like, if you go back into, we talked about this with Nicholas Roerich and the Theosophists, and and Annie Besant and Alice Bailey and all these people, Bishop Ledbetter. I mean, that was clear. They thought that a new age was coming, right? Based on all their calculations, with Uranus coming back into Aquarius, it was going to be the birth of a new age. It was coming. So they had to find a world savior. And of course, that for them was Krishnamurti. But you can just see in this chart that the birth of the new age, the absolute conception of the new age, whether you like it, believe in it, love it, hate it, move it on, it's right there. It's right there in the 8th house in this chart for this woman to anchor it. Now, the South Node is there as well. So I'm sure we could have a discussion about that. This is a strong personality. Sun in the 2nd house, trine Pluto. This is not a wallflower. Pluto and Aries. Some of the stuff around Arianism and like the Thule Society, and there's some stuff in here that kind of connects, right, with Madame Blavatsky. There's the Hyperboreans. The Nazis were really into the Hyperboreans, and I think there's some of that in Blavatsky and Isis Unveiled. But this is a very, very strong personality. Again, though, right? Here's the conception, the New Age, 8th house opposition, giving birth to it through the strength of the personality with the Sun True Node conjunction in the 2nd house. And then, of course, there's Mars and Mercury and Saturn. 3rd house, lots of writing, volumes of writing, the channeling. Where does the channeling come from? That's interesting. Neptune is a singleton. Check that out. Neptune is unaspected. When any planet is unaspected, it's almost like a free agent. And there's immense potential for an unaspected planet. There it's in the 7th house, partnership, looking for people, theoretically, that she could bond with and work with for her vision of the New Age. No water in her chart, though. This was not a woman who trafficked in sentimentality. So even though she's Cancer rising, even though there's Neptune on the descendant, there's not a lot of water. There's no water really in this chart. What do we got? The ascendant in the midheaven. That's it. So you're not dealing with a sentimental person. The inconjunct is Pluto, Aries, right? Pluto and Aries is like will. It is will. Pluto and Aries is hardcore will. And it's a vision. And the inconjunct was all the details, the attendant details, Mercury, Mars, Saturn, and Virgo, that were there to somehow figure this thing out. I think that would be pretty hard in some ways. Like, I think for people who tend to be visionary, and they see things, and when they can't put it together, or the world isn't really ready for it, I think it'd be very, very difficult. And I think we can see that here in this inconjunct that she has. It's a fascinating chart. Absolutely fascinating chart. The takeaway for me is the birth of the New Age with Jupiter and Uranus, the conception of the New Age in Madame Blavatsky's 8th house. Speaking of New Age, I noticed that Miss Cleo's birthday, Miss Cleo shares the same birthday as Madame Blavatsky. Remember Miss Cleo, Psychic Hotline? She 12th housed it. Look at her 12th house. Uranus, Pluto, Mercury. Okay, we'll talk about that. Yeah, she's gone. Miss Cleo punched out. I didn't know that, by the way. But remember, let's go back. Let's go back to 1989, 1990. And what's blowing up? Phone psychics. Remember the 888 numbers? Holy smokes. I used to work for a phone psychic. It was a trip, total trip. And they were legit. They were totally legit. They were actually two psychics, and they had a business in San Francisco, and they knew a guy that used to work for AT&T. He left. They created the system. I had to audition for them. I had to give them a reading. It was a total trip. There was this one gal she was very sweet, very, very sweet, very nice. And she lived in LA. I think I told the story before. Anyway, she was a hooker. That's what she did. And she would steal her John's credit cards. She should be in a hotel. She stole their credit cards. And I didn't know this for a long time. But it took me a couple months to figure this out. But she would steal their credit cards, and then she would call me on her John's credit cards, and we would talk for 2 hours. Like I'd get paid. This is like 1993 money, right? I'd make $150 an hour off of her, and she would talk to me all the time, and she would tell me stories about stuff, which I don't want to get into. But eventually, could you imagine being the wife of one of these guys who had their credit card popped by a hooker, and you see all these charges on the psychic hotline on the credit card? Like, if you're a wife, where does your head go with this? Maybe if you have New Age inclinations, you're like, oh my gosh, he's spending all this time with the phone psychic. There might be hope for him yet, right? Or it's like, what the hell is going on here? This guy has no interest in psychics. What is happening here? Could you imagine being one of those guys? Right? Stan, I need to talk to you. Yeah, what about? Well, there's some unusual charges showing up on the credit card. And, up to like $300. Stan puts his paper like, what? It'd be like this. What? Yeah, Stan, do you use a phone psychic? What do you think that guy does? I was like, oh shit. Does he like make something up on the fly? Yes, I've been using a phone psychic a lot lately because I've been going through a lot of work, and oh, Stan, you can always just talk to me, or what if he just gets caught red-handed? What if she calls, doesn't even ask Stan? Well, we've had some problems. What are the problems? Well, there's a woman who's been stealing these credit cards in Los Angeles and using them. Stan, did you know your credit card was? This is not going to end well for Stan. I'm telling you. Anyway, Miss Cleo. Well, she was there. She was, look, she's got her true node, 11th house, Leo, sun in Leo. The psychic network could be conceivably like an early version of a social network in some ways. It's not YouTube like we're doing now, but it's kind of one-on-one, but there's a lot of people doing it. It's definitely kind of an 11th house thing, but also a very 12th house thing because it's a psychic moment. Like I was sitting there at my table, my cards, and focusing, concentrating, away from the world. 12th house. Miss Cleo was trafficking in the 12th house. And she's living her chart in a lot of ways, right? Uranus, Mercury, using new technologies. But Miss Cleo was not really all that above board. Look at Neptune in the second house. Second house is money. It's money. She's got Neptune there, and Neptune's in Scorpio. So she was using her Neptune to make money. Hey, why not? Squaring Saturn. Miss Cleo broke a few rules with the Neptune-Saturn square. She had that in common with Mr. Castro, apparently. So she got in trouble. The whole thing was that, well, you're not really psychic. None of your people are psychic. You're just using scripts. And that's true. It's exactly what they were doing. They were using scripts, and she was busted. And she lost it, pretty much everything, whatever she had. Mars and Gemini on the midheaven. That is communication. That is communication. We saw who Miss Cleo was. Mars and Gemini. Very active, but there was two sides apparently to Miss Cleo. She became a sad life, super sad life. She became a lesbian. She had 2 kids, became a lesbian, and then she died. Becoming a lesbian isn't sad, but I think after the psychic network fell apart, look where the moon is, 4th house, Capricorn. She was reaching women in their home with moon in the 4th house, trying all those planets in the 12th house, Pluto, Mercury, Uranus, right? She got her, man, I'm telling you, whether she knew it or not, she was working her chart. She was definitely working her chart. Venus in Libra, Miss Cleo, she was not unattractive. Trining that Saturn in Aquarius, again, technology, networks. The inconjunct there is Saturn with, guess what? Saturn with Pluto. Power. She got caught in the power inconjunct. She couldn't figure it out. She couldn't figure out how to ground it. I guess she couldn't pay off the right politician. Look, that was a limited hang anyway, right? The whole psychic network 888 stuff was a limited hang. Whatever was kind of more from Transform would show up years later in places like Keene or whatever. It was a limited hang. And she's not reputable. Neptune Sun square, Neptune Saturn square. Sorry. But the elements of her running the psychic network, which is like what they called it, it's in her chart. And it's interesting because she's the same day as Madame Blavatsky. 2 fairly influential people in their own right. Right? All right, here's the last chart. This is an interesting chart. And I just stumbled across this. And it's another Castro. And when I saw it, I was like, is this guy related to Castro? And I don't know a lot about him. Only what I was able to glean. I've done a web search. I didn't find a whole lot. But apparently, this was a young boy who at the age of 3 was diagnosed with cancer. And at the age of 5, they were cruising down the Pacific Coast Highway, and I think they stopped off at Yogananda's place in Encinitas, which, if you've never been there, you've got to go one day. I would say put it on your bucket list just because it's so freaking beautiful and peaceful. And I lived in Encinitas. I went there all the time. Anyway, he went there as a 5-year-old, and he knew he was having a hard time with cancer. He was born in 1970. He converted to Vedantaism at the age of 5. And apparently this kid was like incredibly high, like an incredibly high being. And he waxed very philosophically about his mortality. And here we go, Pluto, 12th house, very close to the ascendant. The ascendant's in Libra. Venus right there, very, very charming. Could one make a case that he would have a short relationship with the self, i.e. Venus and Uranus? Quite possibly. He died at the age of, I believe, 8. He was 8 years old when he died. And in his progressed chart, at the time that he died, Pluto was further into his 12th house, and Uranus was right on his ascendant when he passed away. And I just thought that this was a very interesting chart from the Uranian perspective, that even at a progressed stage or phase at the age of 7 or 8, the Uranus would definitely play a role and ultimately, usher him in to his 12th house. A fascinating story. And, what's odd is that life force, he's got that Sun-Mars conjunction up in the 11th house. That's life force. But it's squaring Saturn, 8th house, limiting it. Saturn in the planet of death and transformation, sex, power. Did you hear that? The thunder. Ooh. Saturn opposition Neptune. Neptune squaring the sun. T-square, right? South Node also on his sun as well. Anyway, I just wanted to show you this chart. And from the perspective of his story, being almost like an enlightened, what if he got what he needed to get before the age of 8 and it was just done, right? What if he figured it out? It was just done. Uranus hitting his ascendant. Is it all about living a long and fulfilling, wizened and sage-like life? Or in the case of Eduard M. Castro, was it his ability to absolutely live in the moment with what he had, tap into something at a very young age, and transcend when the moment came, then move on? I don't have the answer to that, but it's certainly an interesting chart and a very interesting, if little known story. All right, let me check in with you all. Let's see what you're up to. What's going on in the chat realm? Let's see what else we got. In my head, cannot crossing over. John Edward crossed over to political John Edwards. Got torpedoed with the fair. Thunder is hot. I know. It is hot, right? The baby Buddha. Yeah. Aquarius ascendant, but thunder scares me. Did you guys hear the thunder, by the way? Did you hear that? Huh? Did you guys hear that thunder? Pretty cool, huh? All right. I think we're going to get on out of here. I hope everybody, well, trust me, it was there. I hope everybody has a fantastic week. Let me just check in on the chart of the moment. Let me see where we're going to be with the moon. Where's the moon going to be tomorrow when you get up and you do your 9 to 5 jive? Oh, lovely Virgo. Isn't that going to be lovely? The lovely Virgo moon on a Monday. You'll have all of your wits about you, no doubt. Just don't take any criticism too personally. We'll leave that aside. Hey, you can find me over at RobertPhoenix.com, and I'll post this up on the website tonight. And if you weren't able to catch it, it'll be there. And that's about it. I want to thank everybody showing up. Rosie says good night as well. She wishes you a very happy Monday. And that's it. We'll be back next Sunday night live stream. I'll be back Friday for a Friday Forecast. And God bless you all. Have a very, very good night.